English Idiom with yours truly, Nanika Edwards. Hi, everybody. Today I'm back with another English idiom. Can you guess what you're looking at? Can you tell what these are? What are these? Yes, they are toucans. And, now the beaks show up a little more brightly, a little more clearly against this backdrop. But what type of creature are they? That's right, they're birds. So, can you guess what today's idiom is going to be? I wonder if you've ever heard it. You can pause the video if you would like to see if you can guess. Birds of a feather. That's the start of the idiom, so I'm giving you a hint now. Birds of a feather, and what comes next? You can pause the video if you want to try guessing. That's right. Birds of a feather flock together. Now, what does that mean? Birds of a feather flock together. By the way, how many birds do we have here? 1, 2, 3, right? 3 birds flocking together. Do you know what flocking means? What do we mean by flocking? What this idiom means is that, and by the way, flocking really means like many people or many things coming together. When you see a group of birds, we usually call them a flock. So the group word for birds is a flock. We also talk about a flock of sheep, like a whole group of sheep all together would be a flock. You talk about the shepherd's flock or the flock of a church. The members of a church would be called a flock because the pastor is considered a shepherd. And in fact, in Spanish, the word for shepherd is el pastor. So the pastor of a church should be like a shepherd, and his members are called a flock, right? Anyway, that's just an aside. Birds of a feather flock together. Have you ever heard this idiom? Do you know what it means? Would you like to pause the video and try explaining to see if you understand what this means? By the way, do you notice that the 3 birds here, the 3 toucans, are flocking together? Well, what this idiom means is that like draws like. Like draws like. Or similar draws similar. Similar people are drawn to each other, like magnets. How do magnets work? They work like this. Do you like using magnets? Do you have magnets on your fridge or anywhere else in your house? Well, when it comes to romantic relationships, and I'm sure that even though you are kids, you probably know about romantic relationships. When it comes to romantic relationships, we say that opposites attract. Opposites attract. But when it comes to platonic relationships, relationships where we're talking about friends, not romantic relationships, but platonic relationships, friend-based relationships that are not romantic. For these types of relationships, we normally see birds of a feather flock together. Very often, when it comes to platonic friendships, we tend to make friends who are a lot like us. or maybe with people that we want to be like, but a lot of times we make friends with people who are very much like us. We tend to be attracted platonically to people who are similar to us. Sometimes when I look at people and I observe people, I think, oh, that's interesting. These two people are friends, or these three people are friends. And I think that's so odd. They do seem kind of different on some kind of level. And then I think to myself, deep calls to deep. There's a reason why they're friends. In most cases, I think it's because they're similar. And there's a verse in the Bible that says, deep calls to deep. And maybe you can look at this reference in many different ways, but I think that one way to look at it is to say that like calls to like, similar calls to similar, deep calls to deep. Yep, deep calls to deep. And right now, I think a dog is calling in the neighborhood. I hope it's not calling to me because I don't think I'm a dog, right? I mean that in like the slang, in slang terminology. If somebody thinks I'm being a little naughty or not too nice, he might say, "Oh my goodness, you're being a real dog," right? But I hope that dog is not calling to me because in that case, it would be dog. That dog may think that this is a case of dog calling to dog, but I'm not a dog. So maybe it's calling to another dog in the neighborhood, right? Not to me. Anyway, deep calls to deep. I don't know if you're hearing that dog barking, but my recordings usually do pick up the dogs in the neighborhood. Anyway, this video is not going to be about dogs. It's going to be about birds. So please feel free to ignore Sparky in the background. The reference deep calls to deep comes from Psalm 42, verse 7. Psalm chapter 42, verse 7, the NIV or New International Version. And I came up with a proverb. I like to write proverbs. You can try writing proverbs if you'd like. You just need to make sure that whatever you say is true. But anyway, this is a proverb that I came up with. Deep calls to deep, shallow calls to shallow. Sheep calls to sheep, callow calls to callow. Okay, now the dog has stopped barking and my fridge is now making noise. Hopefully the recording is not going to pick it up. But anyway, deep calls to deep, shallow calls to shallow. Sheep calls to sheep, callow calls to callow. Do you know what callow means? Do you know what shallow means? Shallow means, the opposite of deep. Shallow is, for example, if you go to the beach, the water right by the shoreline would be shallow. When you step into the water at the shoreline, it may be just up to your ankles, or if you walk a bit further into the sea, it would probably be up to your knees. That's shallow water. So it's the opposite of deep. And callow, I think there could be different meanings for callow, but here I mean cowardice, like being cowardly. So callow calls to callow. And that's why I actually color coded that yellow, right? Callow calls to callow, meaning the cowards call to the cowards. And by the way, there are different types of cowardice. Some people may be moral cowards, some people may be physical cowards. Some people may be really afraid of physical pain. They would be physical cowards. And then some people may be just really afraid to do the right thing if it's going to make them unpopular. Those people are moral cowards. Generally speaking, if someone is a moral coward, they will never find the courage to do the right thing. But someone who is a physical coward, but who has great moral courage, may have enough courage to overcome their natural fear of pain. And such people may find that Their moral courage trumps their physical cowardice, and they may find that in a particular situation that having moral courage will help them find physical courage to face some kind of threat if it means standing up for something that is right. So it's better to have moral courage than physical courage, actually. It's better to have moral courage than physical courage. And it's better to be a physical coward than a moral coward if you have to choose between the two. But I'm kind of going off topic. Anyway, here's a general rule of thumb. And this is something that is something of a saying, right? This here is a saying. Show me your friends, and if you show me your friends, right? If you show me your friends, as in, if I see who your friends are, show me your friends, and can you finish this? You can pause the video and try to guess what's coming next if you've never heard this before. Show me your friends, and I'll tell you who you are. Show me your friends, I'll tell you who you are. Show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are. Why? Because birds of a feather flock together. Like draws like and similar draws similar, especially with platonic relationships, with friendships, with buddy-buddy, pal-pal relationships. When I see who your friends are, I can also predict. What do you think I can predict? Can you guess? That's right. I can predict where you're headed. When I see your friends who you hang out with on a daily basis or weekly basis or fairly regularly, once I know who you spend a lot of your time with platonically, then I know where you're headed. These are the people you talk to often, you share your secrets with, maybe you joke around with, you let down your guard with. These are people that you would readily accept advice from, probably. These are people who can influence you, even when you think they may not be. Because friends rub off on each other. Who you spend time with will rub off on you. So guess what? When I see who your friends are, I can tell you where you're headed. I can tell you your destiny. I can tell you what your destiny will be if you continue hanging out with certain friends, whether they're good friends or bad friends. I can tell where you're headed just by looking at how your friends behave. If you have good friends, for example, who study hard, they're academically disciplined, they're kind, they treat people well, they're just wholesome people, and these are the people you choose as your friends, then I know that really good qualities are going to be rubbing off on you and that you can expect to live a very fulfilling life, because these friends are subliminally, indirectly, subtly teaching you how to make good decisions and how to treat other people respectfully. On the other hand, if you spend time with people, I mean like a lot of time, like every day, every other day, every week, every month, you're hanging out with your crew, and let's say your crew includes people who like to steal, maybe, like to treat people badly, like to bully people. If you find yourself with that kind of crowd, if you're a part of that crowd, then I can tell you they're going to rub off on you. You're going to find that you may join in bullying other people. If they're into stealing or vandalizing property, you may find that you start stealing and vandalizing property. And where would that lead somebody? That could lead you to jail. That could lead you to being arrested. That could lead to delinquency, and delinquency can lead to some form of crime that could lead to prison. So you see, it's very important to be careful the friends that you choose. It's very important. Metaphorically speaking, if we're talking about toucans speak rainbow promise and shower you with gold. Okay, that's a kind of riddle. See if you can work it out. Try discussing that with your parents, an adult in your life, or your friends, or your teacher. Take it to your classroom and say, let's try and figure this out. Toucans speak rainbow promise and shower you with gold. Toucan friends who speak rainbow promise will shower you with gold. Can you work out that riddle? See if you can. Now we have a different type of bird here. What do you see on your screen? That's right, these are hummingbirds. Did you know that Trinidad is known as the land of the hummingbird? This was the name that we were given by the people who lived here before Columbus gave us the name Trinidad. When Columbus came to this part of the world, he met these people here, the original peoples of this island, and they had called us the land of the hummingbird. So we're called the land of the hummingbird. What do you think hummingbirds would represent when it comes to friendship? Metaphorically speaking, what kind of friend would a hummingbird friend be? This is what I think, but you might come up with something different. Hummingbird friends, right? Hummingbirds hum in harmony. Hummingbirds hum in harmony. Harmony is the opposite of drama. You know, there's some people who love drama. They either love creating drama or talking about drama or being involved in drama. Those kinds of friends can really get you into a lot of trouble. But hummingbird friends love peace. Hummingbird friends love harmony. Hummingbird friends will not always be looking to pick fights with you over petty, silly things. Hummingbird friends hum in harmony. Hummingbirds hum in harmony. So if you know somebody who's generally peace-loving, they're not always trying to pick fights with people, they're just generally good, wholesome people, those are good friends to have. And what do we have here? That's right, these are chickens or hens. Chickens, hens, you can use either word, right? So what do you think of when you think of chickens? I think maybe a lot of people would think of cowards, like, don't be chicken, you're a chicken. You know, your friends like to call you chicken when you don't want to take part in some stupid, dangerous dare. And by the way, if somebody's daring you to do something that is stupid, that's not something you have to agree to do. You don't have to prove anything to anybody. And sometimes when people call you chicken to try to get you to agree to accept a dare that could lead you to do something dangerous, usually they're looking for cheap entertainment. They may not care what happens to you, like if you get injured or hurt or something. And also, they may not have even thought through the possible consequences of what they're asking you to do. So don't ever feel that you have to prove yourself, that you have to do something dangerous and stupid. And usually these things are dangerous and stupid. Not all the time, but sometimes. In that case, don't bother to be enticed or pressured by that kind of peer pressure, right? Just because you don't do something dangerous doesn't mean you're a chicken. It doesn't mean you're a coward. It means you're wise. It means that you don't believe in doing stupid things for no good reason, or you don't believe in doing dangerous things for stupid reasons, right? So don't let anybody try to gaslight you or try to tell you that you're a chicken. Just don't bother with them, right? So yes, these are chickens. Now, these are chickens. In Trinidad, we have a saying, hens run about like, or we don't usually say hens, but we say you're running about like, but here I put hens instead of a person. Hens run about like, friends who are like hens run about like headless chickens. So headless chickens run about as if, they have no common sense. The idea is that, are you hearing the morning birds? It's now almost 5:30 in the morning, so the birds have started to sing. I hope you can hear them in the background. They're so lovely. And so lovely that they're joining this video when we're talking about birds. But anyway, a headless chicken, metaphorically, is somebody with no common sense or who's totally frazzled and so anxious that they just cannot think straight. That's somebody who's running around like a headless chicken. No sense of organization, no kind of logic. Now, if you have friends who typically get anxious about things and they can't think straight and they're always, very high strung, then I wouldn't say you don't want to be friends with these people, but you have to be careful that they don't rub off on you. And you have to be careful because, there may not be anything morally wrong with these people, but maybe you as a friend can help them to overcome this character trait, either by giving them good advice or by encouraging them to speak to an adult who can help them, right? So some of your friends may be like headless chickens, right? So in this case, I didn't think of cowards. I thought of headless chickens. And if you want to speak about it generally, you could say you don't want to have friends who are like headless chickens in the sense that they don't operate logically, like they have no common sense. You don't want to spend time with people, or like not a lot of time with people who have no common sense. Why? Because they will start rubbing off on you. So that's not a good thing to do, or at least it's not a wise thing to do. Okay, what do we have here? That's right. Parrots. What letter does the word parrot start with? That's right. Are you seeing the P's there? Right. What do you think parrot friends are like? This is my version for the parrot. You again may come up with something different. Parrots, parrot. Parrots, parrot. Like a topless carrot. Like a topless carrot. I wanted to rhyme, so I came up with this, right? What do I mean by topless carrot? You know that some people who have red hair are called carrot tops. I don't think they like to be called that, but typically in English we would call them carrot tops because carrots are orange and their hair is kind of like orange, right? So we call them carrot tops. So when I say topless carrot, what I mean is topless as in no top, no head. Parrot friend will parrot like a topless carrot. Like somebody who doesn't have a head. Let's say it's a redhead. They don't have their carrot head, right? That's what I mean. And of course, no offense is intended here. So the parrot friend goes a bit further than the chicken friend, than the hen friend, right? The parrot friend is very much a victim of peer pressure. They don't think, they just say what everybody else is saying. They just do what everybody else is doing without thinking too long or hard about the consequences or even whether they truly agree or not. So parrots parrot. And again, this is why it's so important to be careful about the friends we choose. Because ultimately, who we spend a lot of time with, what's going to happen? That's right, they will rub off on us. And if we have friends who don't think, to the extent that they simply repeat like a robot what everybody else says, what everybody else does, and they're just like parrot friends, then what happens is you too will become like a parrot. And you will also lose your identity to your parrot crowd, to your parrot posse, right? So you don't necessarily want to be part of a parrot posse, because a parrot posse, you can also connect to something else that begins with P, and that is peer pressure. A lot of times when people join parrot pal groups, it is because they feel pressured by something called peer pressure. When you feel the pressure to do something you don't want to do or be somebody that you don't want to be, simply to fit in, simply to blend in with the crowd, that is peer pressure. That is peer pressure. And it can, if you stick with a crowd like that, say all through primary school, all through high school, by the time you're an adult, you won't even know who you are. So you definitely do not want to be part of a parrot posse. In Trinidad, we have a saying, and it goes like this. So this is another way to look at the parrot, right? Or a parrot friend, if we could put it like that, metaphorically speaking, of course. Like you eat parrot bottom. Looks like you ate a parrot's behind. When we say that in Trinidad, we mean that we usually say this about somebody who talks a lot, like somebody who's very chatty, right? So for example, somebody might say that about me because I'm very chatty, actually. I love to talk. You ever notice parrots, they're always squawking, they're always talking, they're very chatty. So in Trinidad, somebody might say to me, like, you eat parrot bottom, because I like to talk, I'm very chatty. But when it comes to your schoolwork, let's say the classroom setting, you don't necessarily want to be that person or be a friend of that person who talks so much that they're always distracting the class. Like they don't know when to stop talking. And that's not the case with me. I'm very chatty, but I'm also very self-controlled. I know when to ease up on that. I know when to be quiet and when I can be chatty. So I understand the difference. But some people don't, and you may sit down in class next to your best friend, but this best friend happens to be somebody who, when you should be working on your math or your English or some problems or projects or something that your teacher has given you, this friend wants to be talking up a storm like they ate parrot bottom. That's not somebody you necessarily want to cozy up to in the classroom, because then you would be distracted from your work and you wouldn't be able to grow as quickly academically or intellectually. So that's another friend, or at least classroom pal, to be aware of. Also, somebody who's chatty to the extent that they don't allow you any kind of space in a dialogue or conversation. You know, somebody who's always talking over you, somebody who doesn't give you an opportunity to express your personality or your views, and somebody who seems not to respect the fact that you are also a part of, or should be a part of, a conversation. That's not a good friend to have. That's somebody who doesn't care about you. And you can tell a lot about somebody by how they conduct a conversation. A conversation is about give and take. You talk, then the other person talks, and you respond, and there's a kind of call and response, you know? You speak, they speak, you comment on what they said, then you say what you think, and then so it goes back and forth, kind of like a ping pong rally or like a tennis match rally of the ball going back and forth. That is what a conversation is like. But some people like to hog the ball. They will not send the ball back too readily. They'll hold on to the ball and leave you at the other side of the court or at the other side of the table, on the other side of the table, wondering when it will be your turn to have the ball, to have the court, right? So be careful with those parrot friends who are so chatty that they don't let you get a word in edgewise. Those kinds of people, sometimes they say, "Oh, I didn't realize, I didn't know I was talking so long." That's rubbish. They knew. They knew. I promise you, they knew. Sometimes people do these things because they're playing power games or they're trying to control you in some way. They may be testing you to see if you will stand up to them. Those are not good people to have as friends because they're very selfish. So I would not recommend parrot friends like that. But I love parrots because they're playful, right? So P for playful. And I think it's fun to have playful friends, right? It's fun to have playful friends. If you're playful and you like being playful in a positive way that's not toxic to anybody, I think those kinds of friends are good to have. So playful parrot friends are good friends to have. All right. How about these birds? What are these? That's right. These are flamingos. Flamingos. Have you ever seen flamingos? Do you have flamingos in your country? Okay, so for me, I love flamingos. I think they're very graceful creatures. I don't know what you would associate with flamingo friendship, but this is what I came up with. Flamingos, flamenco, fine. They are like grace divine. They are like grace divine. And by grace, I'm talking about like the grace of God. They have a graciousness about them. They're very elegant. They seem very gentle. I don't know if they are, but they seem very gentle. They're very elegant. And I think if you have friends who are sophisticated, whether intellectually or in some other way, people who know how to handle relationships, human relationships with finesse, who can, for example, if they have something difficult to tell you, they can say it with finesse, they can say it delicately, they can say it sensitively when that is called for. Those are wonderful friends to have, and you can learn from them, they can learn from you, and then you would find that these kinds of friends actually will, where they will rub off on you will be in the area of communication, especially whether that communication is verbal or whether that communication is behavioral. These are the friends who will teach you to be classy, sophisticated, and elegant. They will teach you how to be well educated, or they'll help you to become well educated, not only in terms of book sense, but in terms of emotional intelligence. Okay, and what about these birds? That's right, these are vultures. In Trinidad, we call them kobo. Kobo. I think kobo in French is not vultures. It's a French word, but kobo in French, I think, is a crow or a raven or something like that. But in Trinidad, we call the vulture a kobo. Kobo. What do you think of vultures? Do you like vultures or do you not like vultures? What's your favorite kind of bird, by the way? I love hummingbirds. I love hummingbirds. I think they're my favorite birds because they're such amazing birds. But anyway, I'm going off topic. Let's get back to the vultures. So, what saying do you think you would come up with respect to vulture type friends? Okay, here's what I came up with. Kobo kya eat sponge cake. This is a saying that we have in Trinidad. Kobo kya eat sponge cake. In standard English, it means vultures can't eat sponge cake. By the way, do you like sponge cake? What's your favorite kind of cake? Well, anyway, what does this mean? It's the equivalent of pearls before swine. It means that vultures cannot appreciate the finer things in life. If you present sponge cake to them, they will turn up their nose They will, well, not maybe not their nose, they'll turn up their beak and they'll say, we don't like sponge cake. Please give us carrion. Give us some dead meat, right? Give us some meat that was just run over on the highway. That's the kind of thing they like. They take that over sponge cake any day, right? So, what are these kinds of friends like? Vulture friends, Kobo companions. What are they like? These kinds of friends are the kinds of people who maybe are crude, crass. They don't like things that are beautiful. They can't appreciate things that are lovely. They prefer things that are grungy and dirty, and they probably would be the kinds of friends who enjoy defacing a wall, writing ugly graffiti across a wall, the kinds of friends who litter, who won't think twice about tossing paper in the road or in a river, the kinds of friends who will go to a food court or some beautiful grassy area. You have a meal and they won't think about cleaning up afterwards. Vulture friends are like that. I don't know if you can think of other things you would associate with vulture friends, but for me, that's what comes to mind. Would you want friends like that? I would not recommend it. These are the kinds of friends who will not be like the flamingos. They will not help you to be classy. Kobo companions are not classy. And if you spend a lot of time with them, you'll find that you too will not be classy. Okay, and our final set of birds here. What do you think these are? That's right, they're owls. They're owls. What do you associate owls with? That's right, we associate owls with wisdom. And if you'd like to get an in-depth explanation about the connection between owls and wisdom, you can find my video in the idiom section of the playlist section of this channel, where I talk about an idiom associated with owls. I don't want to give it away because when you view the video, you can have fun guessing what the idiom is. But I do a deep dive into why owls are connected to wisdom. Anyways, here is a saying that I think is important to keep in mind. Walk with the wise and become wise. Associate with fools and get in trouble. Proverbs 13, verse 20, NLT version. Let's look at that again. Walk with the wise and be wise. Associate with fools and get in trouble. So which would you prefer? Would you prefer to associate with the wise or with fools? And we have another saying from the Bible. As iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. You can think of a sharpener sharpening a pencil. That's what we're supposed to be like for our friends. We're supposed to make each other sharper. For my friend, I'm supposed to be like a pencil sharpener, if my friend is a pencil, and vice versa, Friends are supposed to sharpen each other, make each other sharp, mentally, quick, insightful, profound. All of that means being sharp. And that saying came from Proverbs 27, verse 17, the New Living Translation, NLT version of the Bible. And here it is again. As iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. Proverbs 27:17, NLT, New Living Translation. Here's yet another saying, and it also comes from the Bible. Bad company. Does anybody know how this ends? Bad company corrupts good character. Bad company corrupts good character. This comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 33. This is from the NLT version, New Living Translation. And here it is again. Bad company corrupts good character. What kind of company do you keep? And what kind of company are you? What kind of friends do you have? And what kind of friend are you? Okay, so we're back to the parrots. By the way, have you noticed something about the parrots that maybe is a little different from some of the other birds, maybe except for the vultures? At least in this video. All the parrots are blue. Did you notice that? All the parrots are blue. Remember we spoke about peer pressure? All the parrots are blue. You will find that if you spend a lot of time with friends, especially friends who want to force you into a mold, they want you to fit in. You know, like how cookie dough fits into a mold, or the way in which, well, like when you're making muffins, the batter will fit into a mold, into the muffin tray, into the muffin tin. That's what peer pressure is like. For example, you maybe are supposed to be a cookie that looks like a star. Peer pressure will tell you, no, 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 we don't want you to look like a star. We want you to be like us. We want you to be a square, or we want you to be a circle. But we don't want you to be no star. We want you to look exactly like us. Notice all these parrots look pretty similar. They're all blue for the most part. You know, a few differences here and there, but they're essentially very similar. That's what peer pressure will do. And that's not what we're supposed to be. Each of us is unique. We're all unique. No two people alike. No two people identical. So don't let peer pressure pour you into a mold that will change your identity into something that it was never meant to be. We have a saying, by the way, in Trinidad: your friends go carry you, or your friends will carry you. That's a standard English version. But they ain't go bring you back. But they ain't go bring you back. But they won't bring you back. What does that mean? It means your friends may take you off on an adventure in inverted commas, and if things go south, they may run, leave you right there to catch trouble, to get in trouble, and may not stay around or stick around to help you out. So friends can carry you, but they won't bring you back. We say this a lot, for example, when say an adolescent or a teenager gets in with the wrong crowd and they end up maybe being part of a crime scene, whether innocently or not, maybe getting arrested, not because they did anything bad, but maybe just because of association, by association. And let's say some of the friends realized that the police were coming, and without warning the friend or the friends who get arrested, they run off and they disappear and leave their friends holding the bag, so to speak, leaving their friends to take all the punishment, to take all of the consequences, to absorb all of the consequences. That's what we mean by your friends will carry you, but they won't bring you back. So what it means is don't start hanging out with people who attract trouble in a toxic way, who attract drama, and who attract trouble you just don't need. Don't hang out with those people, because the day will come when you might find yourself holding the bag, whether innocently or not, and they might get away and you might be the one to get in trouble and pay in a way that they may not pay in that moment. They might pay later, but you might pay earlier. So, be careful. I hope the message is coming home like birds coming in to roost at the end of the day. I hope the message is really coming home. Here's yet another saying: one bad apple spoils the whole barrel. One bad apple spoils the whole barrel. What do you think is meant by that? It's the same as bad company corrupts good character. That's what it means. Notice which birds are here. Huh? Which birds are these? That's right, the vultures, the kobos. So, You have a choice. Who would you choose as your friends? If you had a choice between the toucans and the vultures, would you choose toucan pals or would you choose kobo companions? Who would you choose and why? You can pause the video and think about that. What I love about the toucans is that they light up the dark. They light up the dark hair. Their beaks are so bright. And that's a beautiful thing about the toucans, their beaks. They promise rainbows, Their beaks, the things that they say are words of promise and encouragement, right? That's how I like to think of them in this case, metaphorically speaking. The Kobos, look at them. They practically blend in with the dark. And the only reason their heads are so bright is because when I did the artwork, I needed to go over the drawing of the head more than once because the scan was not picking up the color. That's the only reason that the heads are so bright, right? That's the only reason they stand out so much. But look at the vultures or the Kobos compared with the toucans. Who would you choose to associate with and why? And I know some mischievous prankster out there is going to say they would prefer the Kobos. But I hope you're only joking about that, right? Common sense would say we hang out with the toucans in this case. Here's yet another saying from the Bible. The Bible has a lot of wisdom, and the Bible has a lot of great advice, especially in the book of Proverbs. If you're looking for street smarts and you'd like a life manual that teaches you how to make wise decisions that will just reverberate, that will reverb across your whole life in the best way possible, then the book of Proverbs in the Bible is a great book to read. And quite frankly, the whole Bible is a wonderful book to read. It's a life manual and it can save you a lot of heartache. And the Bible definitely has quite a lot to say about friendship. The righteous should choose his friends carefully. Would you agree, after everything that we've said, that we should choose our friends carefully? Why? For here means because. For the way of the wicked leads them astray. Astray means far off course, far from where you meant to be. For example, here in Trinidad, sometimes when people go to the beach, they may swim in the shallow area and think, okay, it's safe here, I'm good. And then next thing you know, before you know it, the tide, depending on how the tides are behaving on a particular day, the tides can carry you out little by little, degree by degree, degrees by degrees, out into the deep. And next thing you know, you're out in the deep. You have no idea how you got there. That's what the word astray means. It means you wander off the path, but in such a gradual kind of way that sometimes you don't even realize when it's happening. And yes, wickedness can lead you astray because at first wickedness may seem fun. And then next thing you know, it gets you into trouble that you were not anticipating. So friends, my little friends, how you choose your friends is so important. And if your parents say, I don't have a good feeling about that person you're spending time with, or I don't like that friend for you, please trust your parents. I would say most times, of course, everybody's human. Most times, parents know what they're talking about. And remember, your parents have more experience than you do. So please be open to their loving advice, to their goodwill advice. And that proverb came from Proverbs 12:26, New King James Version, NKJV, the NKJV. So here it is again. The righteous should choose his friends carefully, for the way of the wicked leads them astray. The righteous should choose his friends how? Carefully, for the way of the wicked leads them astray. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 26, New King James Version, the NKJV. So that's it. Do you remember what today's idiom is? Birds of a feather, what do? Birds of a feather flock together. Birds of a feather flock together. Some bring rainbows, some bring bad weather. That's my extended version of this idiom. All right, so birds of a feather flock together. I really hope that you enjoyed that. If you did, thank you so much for giving this video a thumbs up. Thank you for sharing this video with a friend or a family member, somebody that you think needs to hear this. And thank you for subscribing to my channel. Until next time.